Good afternoon, everybody. It is good to see you all. I think I wrote an article in 2013 in the Huffington Post. It was about how the rise of Narendra Modi will be parallel to the decline of the free press in India. This is 2013, I think. And everybody thought that I was being very alarmist about it, that, there is no threat to the free press. And now I think it's been almost 13 years, and India ranks 165th in the World Press Freedom Index. And I think that is more telling of the nature of free press in the world's democracy, that the Prime Minister of this country has not taken a single press conference in his third tenure, and the Prime Minister of the world's largest democracy has not taken a single press conference, and the journalists in this country have not asked him any question as to why he has not addressed the media. And for me, that is one of the biggest failure. And the 2 days that you have mentioned, whether it is the takeover by Adani, the takeover by business houses of mainstream media channels, I think you go to the airport. I'm just coming from Bombay, right, Mumbai. I'm just coming from Bombay, and if you see the news channels, they're only serving the agenda of the ruling government. You feel like you're reading a press note and not watching news, and it's disheartening because at the end of the day, news is meant for reporters to talk about the less privileged. And all we are hearing right now is the story of the privileged in this country, the ones who occupy political power, the ones who occupy capitalist power in this country. Their news is being spoken about. So whether it is the takeover of Quint, whether it is the takeover of NDTV, whether it is the raid on NewsClick, the media organization, where massive raids happened at NewsClick organization, whether it is the arrest of journalists under UAPA, whether it is the killing of journalists. I can speak for myself personally. I spend more time in court than I spend covering news. Last year I was in Manipur. I went to do a news story, and IB officials followed me everywhere for 3 days till I finally decided I have to go home. So I suddenly feel journalists are being treated like criminals. It's like there was a time when journalists used to be, you know, you used to feel important about your voice. You used to feel respected. But the way we are now, I think we are being treated as criminals only by the mere function of witnessing something. And I think that's what will be one of the salient features of the Modi media and the Modi years is that the press crawled like never before. I don't think we have an independent press or not even a semblance of it, right? What we have are independent platforms which are running through subscriptions. What we have are YouTubers. What we have are people doing journalism on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. But if you watch mainstream news media, the journalism is gone. And I think all of us should worry about it because the way it impacts the media is also the way it impacts us and our daily lives. A catastrophe has to happen tomorrow. Like yesterday, two climate activists were arrested. Why? Because they have been talking about pollution in this country. So is anybody really safe? Is the media even talking about it? You get to know about it from the BBC and the Guardian. Where is the mainstream media reporting on it? So I think that for me is the salient feature of the Modi years.
Thank you. Just two quick takes on what you said. One, she's a Washington Post columnist. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. The second thing, Rana, if you remember, a very respected minister in Modi's first cabinet, he coined this term prostitutes. Remember that? Like, synonymous with prostitutes. Yeah, anyway. So let's move on to the next question. The media universe in India has got something like 127,000 registered publications in a staggering 189 dialects and languages. These are official RNI figures. Now, out of this 127,000, 22,000 are daily newspapers. Along with that, we have something like 900 channels, out of which again 300 are news channels, most of them on air 24/7. Plus, you have another 900 FM stations, of which only AIR is supposed to broadcast news. And to cap it all, you have 80 crore active internet users. Now, where I'm coming from is I'll show you a book, which to us is like a Bible in the media industry. I would recommend that you should go through this. This is written by an American Armenian called Ben Bagdikian. This was published in 1983. It's called The Media Monopoly. Now, when Bagdikian wrote this in he finished it in 82. It was published by Beacon Press in 83. When he wrote this book in the 80s, there were 500 corporations running the US media. By the time he wrote a revised book in 2000, it's called The New Media Monopoly, it had whittled down to 5. So look at the scale from 500 to 5. That is the amount of corporatization that goes on. So my question to you, Rana, do you envisage such a scenario in our media universe too?
I mean, we are already at that scenario, aren't we? Because in the sense that where is the media in India? In the sense, where are the powers that be? There has been a takeover of all democratic media. So I think we are.
Or a culpable silence, I would say.
Sorry?
A culpable silence.
Yeah, it is. It is. I mean, and anything which does not speak truth to power is silence. It's criminal silence for me. And what the media is doing right now is maintaining a criminal silence, right? Yesterday, I was watching some episode on a television channel about Umar Khalid. And the way they were talking about Umar Khalid is like he was a criminal, right? The same set of people are not outraged when people are lynching people on the streets. The same set of people are not outraged when in Jammu right now, yesterday, people were celebrating the shutting down of a medical college. In a country where COVID saw the maximum devastation, in that country we are celebrating the shutting down of a medical college. That speaks to the moral depravity of this country.
And please mention why they were celebrating it.
And the reason why the medical college is shut down, because these students, they cleared the need. 40 students were Muslim students. Just so that they didn't want Muslim students, they shut down an entire college. What does this say about a country? What does this say about our moral compass? And I think the media, in the mainstream media, I mean, whatever Trump says about India, and we know that Modi hosted Trump so many times in this country, right? The Howdy Modi thing in Houston, in Gujarat, the song and dance. And right now, every single day, Trump is humiliating India and Modi, right? But we are not supposed to talk about it because it's not nationalistic. Who's saying this? Is the media who says that if you talk about India, you are anti-national. The thing is, there is a clear during the Manmohan Singh regime, all of us wrote about corruption, all of us wrote about mismanagement, but we were not called anti-nationals. But suddenly, criticizing the Modi government is like criticizing India. This is not something that used to happen before. And the people who have channelized the debate in this direction, that anybody who criticizes the Modi government is anti-Indian, is the mainstream media. The moment any opposition leader gives a speech in the US, I remember when I gave a speech at the UN, United Nations General Assembly.
What year was this?
This is in 2023. I think back home, the chatter was, they were not honored that I was speaking about India. They said, anti-national run are you speaking at the UN General Assembly? So how clearly the media has moved from being a voice of the country to being a voice of the government, to parroting lines of the government. I think that I feel when the history of this country is being written, right? I think the role of the media will be one of the most salient features. And somewhere I think we are also responsible for it. Somewhere we are not, we are consuming that media, we are consuming the television media, we are not raising our voice. There are a lot of independent journalists, a lot of independent platforms, but they are not good enough for us. Somehow we are not consuming that kind of media. And I think there needs to be awareness, and there needs to be, the consumption needs to be there. I don't think we are consuming. And in the minds of the public, right? When the government files cases against us journalists, why is it doing that? It is doing that to criminalize us. So if I'll give you my example, it's a bad example, but if any journalist is arrested, and if there are charges against any journalist, like on December 31st, I had gone to Hyderabad to celebrate New Year with family friends, and I got a call from the police saying, we are at your doorstep. And I said, but why is the police at my doorstep on December 31st? Because there was a Lawrence Bishnoi threat to blow up my house on December 31st. Now, me and my family, my nephews and nieces, they all stay in that house. Why should they live under this threat of being blown up by Lawrence Bishnoi, a gangster who was in Gujarat, in a jail in Gujarat, right? But that is happening. So I have a public voice, but what about young journalists who do not have that public voice? They will come into the profession and say, oh, this is very depressing. Our family does not want us to do this. The journalists on social media who are speaking truth to power, when they get rape and death threats, their family will be like, sit back, you don't have to do this. So what are we doing to honor them? What are we doing to, we are still a privileged bunch of journalists from Delhi and Bombay and Bangalore and mainstream cities. The real journalism is being done by journalists in areas where our social media does not reach. These are journalists who are being jailed. These are journalists who are being killed. There have been journalists in Maharashtra who are being killed for exposing corruption, but nobody talks about them. Journalists in Kashmir, we should not. I went to Kashmir to report a story on press freedom. I spoke to some 35, 40 journalists. Not a single one wanted to come on record because they said, if we speak to you, if we give an interview to you, tomorrow the IB will come us and arrest us. So that's the state of the media. That's the state of the mainstream media. That's the state of the media in Kashmir, in Manipur, in Assam. So some of us speaking here in Kerala, can I do this in Delhi anymore? Can I give this lecture what I'm giving right now? Can I give it in Delhi? Impossible. And that is what is the moral corruption in this country. That is something we need to be really scared of. What you're speaking about, what happened in the US, has happened in India way before that.
Thank you. Again, two quick takes, Rana. One, this Lawrence Bishnoi thing, pardon me if I ask you this, has he suddenly turned a nationalist gangster?
Yes.
Good. Yeah, we have started to have nationalist gangsters also now. That's the first in the world. Good. Okay, the second thing is because you have, oh my God, I got cracks. Okay. Because you are mentioning Kashmir and independent journalism so much, I think we should pay tribute to one of the very fine journalists there, who I am sure you also would know, a good friend of mine called Gauhar Gilani. You know Gauhar, no? You know Gauhar. He does amazing work. Anyway, let's move on to the third one. This again is something very significant, which again will lead us back to the corporatization angle. In 2025, the value of the total Indian media industry, which includes gaming also now, please don't be under the impression that media means press. It's moved on, including gaming is part of the media industry. ENY, that's Ernst & Young, has calculated that to be in the region of 1.69 trillion Indian rupees. To make sense in the Indian context, that is 1,69,000 crores. 169 lakh crores. That is the value of the Indian media market. And in 2026, this year, the Indian media is supposed to attain the status of the fifth largest in terms of value globally. Now, from there, we'll go to the Hindi heartland, where basically Jagran, Hindustan, Amar Ujala, Jagran, Dainik Jagran, Daily Jagran, Hindustan, Amar Ujala, and Dainik Bhaskar. These four newspapers account for 3 out of the 4 Hindi readers across the country. Because these people have, even in Bangalore and Chennai, they have it. Now, the question here is, how will this scenario play out in the other regional languages? Will this sort of consolidation be there in other regional languages? Because when consolidation happens in other regional languages, the Adanis and Ambanis will start eyeing the regional languages. How do you envisage that kind of a scenario?
I think the regional media is already being bought over. The likes of TV9, the likes of all those regional players in the media. I think they're already being bought over. So when you capture mainstream publication, there's a ripple effect. And when I say capture, I also want to make this point very clear that we cannot absolve the responsibility of people who own these publications and then sell it to the Adanis and Ambanis. You cannot take away their responsibility in selling their publications. Of course, there are the ED, the Enforcement Directorate, the income tax. They play a vital role, but what is happening is they also understand that the real stories are in the regional media, right? The real stories when when COVID happened, when the devastation COVID happened, we realized the power of the regional media because the real death, the real carnage was happening in villages where there was no medical facility, and then these people were posting images on Twitter and social media. Uh, you see what's happening in Israel and Gaza, right? In Gaza, there are a lot of the Israeli the pro Zionist voices, post October 7, were very vocal till the journalists in Gaza, the local journalists in Gaza, started publishing their voices on TikTok and Instagram and Twitter, and that's when we got to know what was happening in Gaza. What is happening in Gaza was not done by international journalism. It was done by local journalists who were being killed, and they were still telling the stories. In India, too, some of the most stellar journalism is being done by independent regional journalism. One of the biggest penetration in the country is in the southern media. There are the newspapers, and in one cannot underestimate the power of the Hindi media, the Hindi newspapers. And if you see their coverage, they sometimes are critical, but the next day they turn into apology mood, which means the penetration, it's not too far that all of them also will be taken over. So, which is why the country, the Home Minister, the Prime Minister, always very concerned about how a Dainik Jagran, a Dainik Bhaskar, Amar Ujala are writing stories about the mainstream media. In the southern press, whether it is in Kerala, in Tamil Nadu, in Telangana, I think there are still some publications. My only hope for them is that when you become critical of one political party, I don't want you to become a cheerleader of the opposition. That is something we need to understand critically. Is so now in the country, because of the polarization, and that's what's happening, that there is no questioning of the opposition party. I'm not saying the opposition is doing all the wrong things. The ruling party is in power, but for the opposition to function effectively, right, we need a media which is not polarized on political lines. For instance, I wrote a critical piece about the Congress party not speaking about bulldozers, the Congress party not speaking about bucks, right? Because they're scared to alienate the majority voter. Now, we need media to question the opposition also, because at this point of time, they are in a position of power. As far as the mainstream media is concerned, I think they have learned their lessons pretty well. I think a lot of them say. I hear a lot of commentary on Twitter that uh, people from the right wing ideology have become mainstream journalists. I don't think that's true. I think the journalists that you see in mainstream news channels are opportunists, right? A lot of opportunists have now come and held stake in on mainstream platforms. I think that is what is happening. Um,
I'm so sorry. Please, are you through?
no, yeah.
I was telling. Oh, okay. I just wanted to remind you. We will. Rana will field questions, but the only request is that please note down your questions and pass it on to the volunteers. It can be in either language, whichever language you prefer. She will take it. I think we'll have how many questions shall we
As
take?
long as the questions, if you can make one line, one sentence questions, it's also good. Yeah.
I hope we are clear on that. Thank you. Again, one thing, taking on from what you said, Rana, uh, because you mentioned COVID. One of the best instances of regional reporting was done by Jagran, Daily Jagran UP. How the corpses were flowing down the Ganges. Amazing piece of reporting, but then it didn't work out in the elections. Can you just give me a reason for that?
Because the same media that is reporting the devastation of COVID, it's like this, right? It's what's happening in America. It's what's happening in Hungary. It's what's happening in Turkey. It's also happening in India. When you tell the majority that your resources are being taken away by the minority, right? Right now we have the civic elections happening in Bombay, right? Which is the largest civic body. So all the election posters that you see in Bombay, they're not telling you, okay, what we will do when we come to power. Will we give you colleges? Will we give you health? Will we give you good hospitals? They are saying if we come to power, we will drive away the Bangladeshis. Who is Bangladeshi? Any Muslim who is it's a dog whistle for any Bengali speaking Muslim in Maharashtra. So when that happens, when you put the entire onus, the entire responsibility all the minority, which is what Trump is doing, right? The Mexicans will take away your job, the migrants will take away your job. That's exactly what is being done in this country. Nobody is holding the government culpable. There was a short time when I actually thought during the COVID coverage that after, if Modi cannot come to power after this coverage, but people forgot. The Hindu-Muslim polarization is so strong that in Jammu, that the example that I gave earlier, people are dancing that one college is gone and that medical college does not exist. Nobody realizes that medical college would have produced good doctors. This country needs good doctors. This country needs good infrastructure. Our people are dying due to food poisoning. Our people are dying due to negligence in hospitals. But are people concerned? So till such time that we are stuck in this religion binary, the Hindu-Muslim binary, the othering, and it happens everywhere and Kerala is not exempt from it. It is happening every single place. When you create the binary of the others, that person will come and take away your job. That person will come and take away your hospital bed. That person will come and take away your education. Then you don't question. The biggest takeaway of the Modi government is it has taken away our instinct to question. We don't question governments anymore. We question the opposition. We question the minorities. We question Muslims and Christians and Dalits and tribals. But we are not questioning the people who rule us. And I think that is the biggest problem that we are facing right now. I mean, we were discussing this morning, right now, as journalists, right, when somebody calls me to a platform and somebody talks about me, they say, oh, the Muslim journalist Rana you. I was never referred to a Muslim journalist, I was just a journalist. But in today's time, people refer to me as a Muslim journalist or a Christian journalist or a Sikh journalist. When did that happen? We were just journalists. We were just activists. We were just ministers. But everybody has everything, every individual has been given a religious hue. And I think when that happens, there is no scope for development and infrastructure.
Thank you, Rana. Again, I think because you mentioned BMC, I was sharing with Rana over lunch my observation on Indian politics. My take is that if you want to be a big player in national politics, it's not necessary that you have to rule any state. It's basically three corporations that matter in this country. Which are those corporations? BMC, Bombay Municipal Corporation, or Bangalore, or Hyderabad. If you run these three corporations, you get enough money to fuel your entire national thing. Okay. The second thing about othering, which is good that you brought it up. Again, personally, one of the best pieces in Indian journalism, the whole of Indian journalism, to me, is a report filed by the late Shankarshan Thakur. Shankarshan was the son of the legendary Janardhan Thakur, who used to be in part of the Star journalism, the earlier avatar of M.J. Akbar as a fantastic young editor of Sunday magazine. You remember that. Now, Shankarshan, what he did is, in the 2019 elections, unlike journalists who do a statewide survey, he profiled just one person. You can check it, you will get it on the net. He had the profile of this fellow called Durgesh Jaiswal, okay, from Varanasi. Now, what is the profile of Durgesh Jaiswal? Durgesh Jaiswal is unemployed. He's around 24. He has no visible means of existence, but somehow he manages to ride a bike. So Shankarshan asked him, a lot of questions he keeps on. Then he says, which is your party? Samajwadi. SP, Samajwadi. Akhilesh. Acha. So whom are you going to vote for? Arey bhaiya, vote to Modi ji ko denge. What? You say you're from SP and you vote for Modi. Why? The answer is classic. Unko jagah dikha diya. People like him. He is the only politician in the history of India who has shown where those fellows should be sitting. You get my point? That is the kind of division that has happened in Indian society. I was also sharing with them, I would again refer you to that. There's a fantastic, it's published by Cambridge. It's a 21, 22 page piece on it's by a scholar called Dayal Paleri, he's a sociologist, he's in Cambridge now. Basically what he does is, he maps the social consciousness of, not the political, he's mapping the social consciousness of Kerala. I hope I can take this, because it's very relevant to our society today. And he specifically takes just Kodungalur. Why Kodungalur? Kodungalur, we should remember, is one of the places where all the three Abrahamic faiths flourished in the whole of the country, whether it's Islam or Christianity or Judaism. All these Abrahamic faiths came through Crangadoon. Now, what he does is he studies us just a couple of pracharaks of the RSS based around the temples. And the title of his paper is Elections Can Wait. That is the opinion of a pracharak who says, I am not bothered about the whether you win elections, whether Suresh Gopi wins elections or somebody XYZ wins elections, whether BJP, I am not interested in that. What I am interested in is that across the country, there is already a Hindu consciousness that is working. This Kerala is the only state which lacks this Hindu consciousness. So what I am working is towards building this Hindu consciousness. And I was sharing with her, I think that thing has already happened in Kerala. Anyway, sorry. Which again brings us to another great sociologist. He is a Hungarian. His name is Balint Magyar. Now in 2016, he theorized about something called the mafia state. You can get it if you search on the net, you will get it. Now, there are a lot of characteristics of the mafia state. Of relevance to us is this one finding. He says that in a mafia state, large companies bring under their control large corporations run by regime-friendly oligarchs. And what do these oligarchs do? They in turn acquire media, which sing the praises of the rulers. Now, you mentioned the examples, Hungary, Turkey, US. This thing has already happened. Ruler-friendly, oligarch-driven media. Could you comment on that, please, Rana?
I think we have been talking about that, the ruler-friendly oligarchy, right? I mean, if you see whether it's Putin's Russia or Erdogan's Turkey or Bolsonaro's Brazil or Viktor Orban's Hungary, right? The first thing that they do, or Modi's India now, and to an extent, what certain sections of the media in Pakistan too, right? Right now, who are paying for the blood of Imran Khan, who has been in jail.
Except probably for the exception of Dawn.
There are many publications in Pakistan which are still doing good work. But the thing is, how do you control the minds of the people? You control the minds of the people through the mass media, right? So if you are at the airport, I'll give you an example of what happened yesterday. You're watching Aaj Tak. I'm just giving an example. You're watching Aaj Tak. But now, of course, now at the airports, because all the airports belong to Gautam Adani, so now you see NDTV everywhere, right? So now it's NDTV everywhere. So I was sitting in the lounge and I was watching the news coverage, and it was like ED lashes out at Mamata Banerjee, BJP wins big in Bombay. Even the small councillor level stories where BJP is winning is being shown as a big story. That's exactly what is happening across the world, right? It is that when these authoritarian leaders, when they come to power, the first thing that they focus is to numb the brains of the people. And how do you numb the brains of the people? You completely take over the media. So if every single day you project a Muslim as a terrorist in India, and the next day you show a demolition, a bulldozer demolition, the media, the people on the ground will not question it. They will say they are terrorists. They need to be shown their place. Same in Hungary, right? All these in Turkey, the number of writers and journalists who are being jailed in Turkey. In Trump right now, you see the way the media is talking about Gaza. You see the way the media is talking about the attack on Venezuela, right? It is bound to happen. The first people who actually who give in are the billionaires and the media houses that they own. In India, Adani was waiting to happen. In India, network 18 was waiting to happen. In India, and one of the biggest problems in the mainstream media in India is that we have publications that are owned by big business houses. Big business houses don't care about press freedom. Big business houses care about their profits. So you are going to get the news that is being filtered by big business houses and their interests. It doesn't care about the marginalized and the oppressed. It only cares about profit, and you are helping them get the profit. And I think it's something that's happened over the world. It is something that's happening in India. And the business pockets, I mean, where are the Adani stories? The biggest Adani story was done by a whistleblower It is something that I have been reporting from Gujarat since probably 2007. We knew the SEZ violations that were taking place in Gujarat by Gautam Adani. He was a small player then. He became a big player because the media ignored and looked the other way. When the Ambani family wedding was happening, you all saw the videos coming every day, right? Like Kim Kardashian is coming to the Ambani wedding, this person is coming to the Ambani wedding, while the poor continue to be poor. During the G20 summit in India, people were hiding the slums. In Kashmir, there was a curfew, and the media is not talking about that. So I think we have been decimated. There is no such thing as a free press. There is no such thing as a free voice, a free opinion in this country. There are certain sections, there are certain journalists who are doing this, and who are doing this, I must tell you, at great risk to their life. Who are doing this, there is not a single day or not a week where I don't get a brown envelope from the government, either from the income tax or from the ED or from defamation or some case. And some days you're exhausted saying, you know what, I don't want to do journalism. But then that's exactly what the government wants. The government wants you to be frustrated and give up. Now, it's a very privileged thing to say, I'm not going to give up journalism because a lot of journalists have to run their houses. A lot of journalists have to pay their loans and pay their bills, and it's not working out. Who's responsible for it? I think we're all responsible, we're all culpable. And deep down, we have to ask ourselves, is this what we are going to leave for the next generation? Are the next generation, are our children going to witness a country which is only about Hindu and Muslim? If that is what you want, great, consume the media. If you want a great upbringing for your kids, if you want a decent upbringing for your kids, question the media narrative that you're watching.
Thank you, Rana. Again, to complement what you were saying, this hate mongering against the minorities, now it started against the Christians also, not just the Muslims. Would you say that you mentioned your 2023 speech in the UN, and do you think that a part of that hate would be against your religious identity also?
I mean, of course, if the kind of hate that I get, if I was a Hindu actually just a Hindu or an upper caste Hindu, I would be seen as somebody who is an irritant at best. Somebody who is an upper caste person who is at best irritant to the government. I would not be labeled an anti-national. I would not be given questions about whether I get funding from the ISI, right? There are so many Pakistani news channels when they reach out to me, when they reach out to me for interview requests, I never even take their calls because I know if I take a single phone call with the number +92, that is it, decimate my entire family. So this, I mean, goes without saying that my Muslimness is a big part of the problem.
Thank you. This is my last question. In the meantime, you can go through this. It's just an observation to what you were mentioning about what you noticed in the airports, the uniformity of the news cycle. Now, again, it's just an observation, Rana. Would you say that we are in the era of the McDonaldization of news?
I don't know if I can give any term because India is a very, very unique case.
You're all American vassals now, so I thought let's go the American way.
I wouldn't want to label it just yet. I think I'll wait and watch. But I think what we are witnessing is a modification of the press. I think that is because it's a very unique moment in we are seeing what we used to see in Gujarat, right? When Ashish Nandi, the scholar, was slapped with sedition for writing an op-ed, and now that is happening in mainstream media. So I think what we are witnessing is a modification of the press. I think we have our own, we have the honor of having our own definition.
Okay, so it's a matter of pronunciation.
Yes, it's a matter of pronunciation.
Good, thank you. So with that, I'll hand over the mic to you. I'll go silent. Please take the questions. Thank you. Thank you.
Somebody just said Modi did give an interview to Akshay Kumar. Whoever was that, I agree. He did give an interview to Akshay Kumar. What is the antidote to dangerous journalism? I think the antidote to bad journalism is that you consume good journalism. And not just the journalism and the celebrity journalists. I think all of us are like celebrity journalists. There are a lot of good journalists in regional media who are doing good journalism. And they don't even take a salary of 20,000 per month, right? These are journalists who have been doing hate tracker. These are journalists who have been talking about bulldozer justice. These are journalists who have been covering mob lynching. Who was covering mob lynching? I think when the first mob lynching happened in India of Pehlu and Akhlaq, the entire NDTV, I remember, was doing everyday debates. Now 3 lynchings happen in a day and people are like, but that was beef consumption. We are more concerned about the meat that we keep in our fridge than the hospital, the oxygen, lack of oxygen in hospitals. So I think the antidote is that you start talking to the children of the house about what is good and what is bad in terms of media. And sometimes I go home and my father has dementia, and sometimes I see him watching terrible news channels and he is sitting and watching, and I feel that nobody's trying to correct him to switch off the news channel or watch something else. I think we as consumers need to make a difference in terms of yeah. Would you agree if your religion is weaponized for upper caste dominance? I Religion is being weaponized everywhere. It's not just about my religion; it's everybody's religion is being weaponized at this point of time. Every single conversation is about religion. Um, so I won't be surprised, right? And upper caste dominance, can I just make that distinction? It's not just a Modi government problem. The upper caste dominance in the media and in our storytelling also existed in the Manmohan Singh days. The upper caste dominance existed all through, and that is a problem, right? I have to say this. Last year, we are in 2026. I was invited by 2 different events, including one in Kerala. And at the last minute, I struck down the invite for 2 reasons. One, every single speaker on that panel was an upper caste person. I think the people who were selecting the panel did not realize. And second, there were 25 speakers, out of which I was one token woman, and all 24 were men, and this was a liberal platform. So I am sitting here in a state like Kerala, right, which is one of the most literate states in the country. And one question that I always ask myself: why has this state not seen a single woman chief minister? It is a big problem. If we call ourselves a liberal state, if we call ourselves an educated state, then there is a bigger responsibility on people like us. Then there is a huge responsibility on us to tackle upper caste dominance, to tackle upper caste narratives. However, the same set of people who criticize, when they cave in and lead to upper caste voices in their discussions, the problem is you don't have the oppressed speaking. In the boardrooms, in all our press conferences in Delhi, right? Every time a journalist is attacked in Delhi, the entire press club will come together and speak in solidarity. But some journalist being attacked in Kashmir does not want the press club coming together and holding the flame. Why? Because we choose, even in the marginalized media, to speak for the more privileged as opposed to the less privileged. I was meeting a Kashmiri journalist and he said something which, after which I'll wrap up this conversation. He's a very well-known journalist. He said he was sitting in the parliament building and they were all watching some news channel, and suddenly the national anthem started playing and everybody looked at him if he was standing or not, right? That even amongst 10 journalists, out of which all of them were liberal journalists, they turned to a Kashmiri Muslim to check if he was standing up for the national anthem. If that is our skewed understanding of nationalism and patriotism, we are never going to move ahead, whether we are journalists, whether we are civil society, whether we are an average citizen. If the division is amongst us, and we need to introspect about how we are viewing news, how we are viewing a democratic society.